see you. I'm just showing you my yard. And welcome to my studio. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Oh. I never let anyone into my studio, and that is because the studio is where you make all your mistakes. But I couldn't resist the invitation from Kate. Such a good cause. So I'm just going to quickly show you around my studio. There's some ink drawings for a new set of prints I'm doing. And what you see on the walls are massive posters for this dump circus, this apocalyptic circus that I've been building for the last God knows how long. And it's really just the beginnings. The reason I don't let people into the studio, it's not facetious, it's because you have to be able to make cracking mistakes. I'm just giving you a feeling of what the studio looks like. It's an old railway arch, the old Kent Road's outside. It's noisy, it's dark. So here is the model for my apocalyptic circus. This is where I began. And I don't know how clearly you'll be able to see on this iPad.
We see it very well.
You see it very well. Oh, God, thank you so much, whoever said that. What a relief. And I was imagining the end of the world and thinking about the human spirit and thinking how it would only be a matter of moments before you could walk into a car dump and somebody would have got something going. Somebody would have made a double bass out of the nice box. And I've started imagining this circus. And it coincided with me going to Spain to visit my brother. What can I show you here?
More slowly, Nicola.
More slowly, thank you. All tips gratefully received. This isn't something I ever do. So I went to visit my brother in Spain, and I'm rather fond of this little owl. He's sitting on a tree stump, and the game he's playing in the circus is catching bicycle tyres on his branch. Penny a tyre. There's a tiny bear with a wheel up on a fridge. When the piece is complete, the only light will come out of the fridge, which is why I love working in the gloom. But it really was the idea of something appearing from nothing and becoming an event. And it began to turn into my imagining the second arc coming up the Thames. And this might be the last circus that happened on the dock as the arc sailed off. I think when this COVID thing began, you know, it made all of us think about so many things we'd rather have not have thought about before. Oops, sorry, there's a lot to fall over in here. That's my puppy. I just wanted to show you there even is a little gift shop. So there were two ideas running concurrently in my head. One was things that don't love you. So I started drawing, you know, teddy bears and things that we invest so much. Yes?
Can you not just hold the camera just for a little while?
Yes, sorry. You feeling queasy?
A little.
I've heard it can happen. How about I just settle there?
That's good.
There's a bear juggling with tractor tyres. Don't know if you can make that out. So I was working on things that don't love you. And I was thinking about the end of the world and grass growing up through cracks in the pavement and starting to build this circus. And then lockdown happened. And I heard so many people talking about how wonderful it was to be creative, to have this chance to be creative. And I have to say, I felt exactly the opposite. I just couldn't find the reason to work. You know, and I think my work is all about life. And because I couldn't see life, have I pressed something? Have I gone wrong?
You've lost your screen, yeah.
How's that? I probably got my thumb on the camera. Can I put it on its rest?
Yes.
Is there anything else anybody would like to see? Oh, look, there's Andrew Logan, Kate, our mutual friend.
Oh,
lovely.
beautiful.
Andrew. So the circus posters are actually quite grim. I'll just show you this. You know, it's not nice. I'm always very, very distressed by what we see animals doing that just seems ordinary. And I don't think the iPad can do this. I think this is the point where you really will feel seasick. But you're just going to have to imagine all these pieces, A, finished, and B, very dark, in a dark space with the circus posters hanging around the edge. And I'm going to walk very slowly and carefully to where I can put this on.
Are you able to tell us about the process?
Of course. What do you know? I never know what's interesting. Here, do you mean how I actually make them?
Yes.
Okay. So, will you all be sick if I turn it up the other end, up the other way?
No. Try us. No, that's good.
So, can you see? This is a tree trunk, a dead tree. Okay. So this is a dead tree that has had many lives in many different sculptures. The way I work is I use, it's a very fierce industrial, like chicken wire, but it's called expanded metal. It's what you make reinforced concrete out of, if you can see. And then anything really, wood, aluminium tubing. Hello, you've gone again.
We've lost you.
Okay, is it on a, your host has asked you to start your video. Okay. Maybe it doesn't like me moving around. Okay,
That's good.
so I start with that stuff, and really you just have to think that every shape that stands needs something like a skeleton, like we do, to stand up. And so you're building on a frame. So if I come closer, you can see this is inside. And then I build up layers of plaster and this is called scrim, sort of hairy stuff. I don't know if I've got any around. And I'm afraid there's no more to it than just carrying on until it looks right. So this tree trunk here, and we've got an owl here, hold on. So, see how many things I can drop. Throughout the studio day, I may play with things on the tree until I come up with the right thing. I'm currently I've dismissed an owl from this one. Doesn't look very stable, I'll take him off. And he's gonna have a cat on it. But that's how I work. And it's a slow process of building up and hacking back. Over here, there's another example. So this one, I made this little chap in clay, and there was something about the way he was standing. Sorry, too many things to manage. There's something about the way he was standing that made me feel something could happen there, but he wasn't right. Nothing was right. So I've remade him here in plaster. Can you see him all right? And what I'm always after in my work is presence. So he will end up striding towards you with a great mass of, like one of those old pom-poms, a great mass of matter on his head. And he will tower above you like men can when they're angry. You'll pick up on the presence of him. So the presence I'm after in the circus, I think, is fairly self-explanatory. It's a sort of self-propelling piece, which is lovely. It feeds itself. And then I do love to make a print. So I'm drawing in ink on lovely paper. And again, you know, think of a cat, virtually an Egyptian god. And we're quite used to seeing them scrabbling around on bin bags, sitting on bins. The crow, to me, is the most magnificent of beasts. And I don't know what it should be eating, but I know it isn't bits of old takeaway and nappies and things. You know, it's cat asleep on a bin. It should be asleep on a window ledge. On a sofa, anywhere, not on a bin. I'm interested in how ordinary a lot of the really awful bits of the world have become. So I'm going to put this back on the stand now, which is going to be an adventure. Bear with me, please.
And then Kate can come and join you.
So I have no idea if I told you things you wanted to know or...
Very much so. So, Kate, are you
great? You walk on.
Yes, I'm right here. I don't know if you can hear me.
We need to turn on your video. You need to turn on your video and...
What I do?
Yes. Well,
okay, here we go. Here we go.
Lovely. And Nicola, are you there still?
I hope so. I seem to be here. So do I need now to go that way around? There we go. Done.
Hello.
God. You know, I think of my kids having trouble with... Oh, you're on again. There.
Very good.
I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to touch it.
Okay. So can you hear me, Nikki?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me all right?
I can absolutely hear you, and that was wonderful seeing your studio. And we feel, well, I feel so honoured because I know we're not normally allowed in. This is a great occasion. I'm thrilled.
Do you know what? I've sort of bored myself. The first lockdown was okay, but this one, I'm so fed up that it just seemed like a lovely thing to do something different. And
thank you.
Your Kettle's Yard project, your project, it was so lovely to be involved. So don't thank me, it's no bother.
Okay, so here we are. Well, I'm going to start the ball rolling by saying I'm a year older than you.
Are you really?
Yes. And you've got one child more than I have. So that's the sort of, you've got two, haven't you?
I've got two. I've got
and
two who are older, and I've got two of my own.
And so, well, I've got a whole load of things here, but as far as similarities are concerned, and you showing the studio, I see a lot of disparity as well. But in essence, I think we both want a response from our work. You know, you talked about presence.
Yeah, you mean from an audience?
Yes, I mean, my objective is an emotional response to my work that isn't sort of in the head, but it's in the chest, in the heart.
Absolutely, it's all I'm interested in. I walk through the world and things have presence. And I don't actually want to make those things. I want to make things with the same presence that they have, or the same effect. I couldn't agree more. But we've got more in common than that, Kate.
Oh, I know we have, but you know, I've been
thinking back about you at the college, because we were at art school together. And I just, you know, you were always that wonderful, friendly person who came around and looked in people's studios and made conversation. You know, most people are so up themselves at art school and so frantic and so sort of desperately, don't look at what I'm doing. And you were like an absolute breath of fresh air. You know, when you started making those pumpkins, they were so good, they were so amazing, and you couldn't believe you hadn't seen them before. And the one thing that really puzzled me, Kate, because I was young and immature and thought I knew everything, obviously, I didn't understand how somebody with such extraordinary sculptural talent was holding themselves to making vessels. I couldn't understand why you weren't in sculpture. Of course, now I completely understand the Zen quality of a vessel and the beauty of working within those confinements. But at the time, I just spent a lot of time thinking, why isn't Kate in sculpture? This is weird. This is colour. This is incredible. Nobody's using colour. And then the next thing that happened, because we've always been friends and had friends in common, but I think both you and I have a fierce work practice. And our real friends are the friends that don't notice if we haven't seen them for 6 months. Because actually we're working, we can't do that, ooh, would you like to have lunch tomorrow thing. But then I remembered, Kate, this is the last thing I'm going to say that will make you blush. I walked into Andrew Logan's kitchen and I saw those dark green tiles that you've done all over the walls, all over the work surfaces, all over everywhere. And I looked at them and I thought, if somebody asked me to make a tile, I would never be able to get further than a flat, shiny thing. I would never understand how you, I still don't understand how you envisage that incredible room of dark green. And it literally made you want to shut your eyes and just feel your way around the room. It was the most sumptuous, tactile use of ceramic I have ever seen in my life. And I think it was at that point I realised that you were not just that nice, friendly, excellent ceramicist, you were something else.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think one thing that I noticed, and again, we've never really spoken like this, is that we've sort of flown in the face of avant-garde. You know, like you say, I made pots, and pots to me are people. They have character, they have shoulder, they have stance, they have lips and chins and feet and bellies, and you know, there's a presence to a pot, and thank you for saying that, and that's very interesting that you said. But really, you were doing figurative, you were doing emotional, you were doing, I've got it written down here, romantic and expressive and mythical. And I was doing, through the sort of 80s and 90s when we left college, you know, the fashion was minimal and characterless and stripped bare of emotion, and I was making these wildly decorative, mad, sort of elaborate pots that were just totally unfashionable. You know, yeah. I thought it was unfortunate that my work was unfashionable, but it didn't stop me. And I think
it couldn't stop you, Kate, because you're the real deal.
But you were saying, you know, you're the same.
Well,
you know,
I was incredibly lucky, Kate. I had a head start beyond all head starts, in that I grew up in a family of artists. So for me, it was not only completely ordinary to the point of, you know, didn't bother talking about it, the fact that the house was full of people making things. And the main toy in the house would have been clay or stones,
wow.
or, you know, beans that I later found out could kill you, but my mother thought were rather pretty for me to play with. And I was also used to a huge number of their friends coming, and you know, there'd be a huge spaghetti bolognese and everyone would be talking frantically about their work and masses of cheap red wine. So I think I grew up understanding that there is a place for the man who paints flat realism. There is a place for the woman who paints the feel of the air. There is a place for the sculptor who works in wood. You know, all these different disciplines made for interesting conversation. So by the time I'd got through 4 years at Chelsea and hadn't fitted in anywhere, I think getting to the Royal College, I was beginning to actively enjoy the fact that I didn't fit in. It's less pressure on you. You're more able to focus on where you need to go. And also, you never become dependent, because you don't have it, on the collective hug. You know, you have no one to talk to about your work. Therefore, you've got to be able to justify absolutely everything you do to yourself in terms of materials or time.
Well, I think that's extraordinary that you should say that. I mean, the thing we had in common was spaghetti bolognese, but I came from a family who was sports journalists, and it was football and golf, and when are you going to get a proper job, because art isn't a real thing. But apart, you know, but not wanting to go onto that, but you saying about the fact that it's quite good to fly in the face of fashion, if you like, and be, but in fact, both of us sort of quite a long way into our work left London, and I went to Provence and worked for 7 years in a cave, and you went to, you know, you went up to the lakes, didn't you?
I did. You went for the sun and the hot stone, and I went for rain that went both ways at the same time. And my French isn't good enough. You know, moving to Provence would have been absolutely heavenly, but I really would have been isolated.
I didn't have French, but yeah.
You didn't have French either?
No. But
I haven't taken that off the shopping list. It's still on my list of things I might do.
come and visit me in France. But no, but the thing is, you see, by removing yourself from everything that's going on, and I didn't do that on purpose. I did it because my husband said he wanted to go to take our daughter to learn another language and grow up in a different environment. But essentially, you're even again removed from what's going on, and you can, I didn't realize it, but you can be more yourself by not being influenced by, you know, everything that's going on, you know. So that continuum.
There was a very short period in my life. I don't want to dwell on it, but if people are so keen to buy stuff out of your studio, and the temptation is to say yes, take it. In somewhere in here, you know, it's not a good one. It needed another 6 months. It needed another go. But the money is fabulous, and I think
necessary.
I've been really lucky that I've been with the same dealer since I left art school, and we get divorced regularly, but I nurture that relationship because I think if I and I know you have the same with Adrian Sassoon, but I think I felt at the time I can go and work anywhere, and I just have to get away from being overly conscious about what I'm making and whether it fits in and whether. So I did. I went, and I had a studio that. It was extraordinary, but the best thing was it was very remote, and I had a field with a couple of worn out old horses outside, and I just used to open the doors and they'd wander in, and it was just, to get beyond what does a horse look like to what does a horse sound like, what does a horse smell like. God, it's big. Thinking about a horse is one thing, we can all draw a horse, but when you're standing under a horse and its head is above you and it's breathing that soft horse breath onto your head, and you look up and look into it, that is a presence. That is something that can't be made. Well, it's what I'm interested in. I want to get that feeling in here. But I didn't. How long did you last in Provence?
We were 7 years in Provence and 2 years then in Barcelona. And I sort of draw a parallel with you, probably not as physical as you bring the horse in, but I rented a studio. I rented a table in a studio like being a student again, and put my daughter in a local school aged 11. And my studio was in the dungeon of the sort of Gothic quarters, right next to the Cathedral of the Sea, and right underneath Montagne's pieces and all the dripping Gothic, deep, dark furniture, architectural furniture. And the streets were sort of, it was like living in this extraordinary Gothic, and it had a huge effect on my work. I didn't think it would, but I started making really Gothic, dark things. And I started studying Montagné, not Gaudi, of course. We had a flat, and I looked out at Gaudi from my bathroom window onto the Sagrada Familia. But it was Montagné. It was this earlier, deep, dark, heavy Gothic Spanish, which was an extraordinary. I could almost, you could almost, I can smell it now. Again, it was removing. It was my husband who removed us. I didn't choose to. I just keep working wherever I'm put, really.
I'm very much the same.
And you've mentioned that life isn't sort of work and life, is it? Life is work.
I am. This is me. This is what I do. This is what I am. And if you stop me doing it for a bit, I'm positively unhinged. In the end, I'm glad you found all that history and all that Gothic deliciousness, which I can feel in my chest. I've got trees and moss were my equivalent. There wasn't a huge Gothic history visible in Cumbria, but there were trees and the sky and the hills and the becks, and it's the first time in my life I was able to go back to that childhood time where nature is everything, and you sit under a tree any day of the year and it's a completely different experience. And that need for the power of nature, I'm not talking about the pretty flat landscape bit of nature, but the deep thumping power of nature, to get that back into my work. And then there suddenly came a point when my children were teenagers, and it just felt cruel. You know, it was a 40-minute drive to see anybody else, and then what was I going to do? Wait outside in the car for them? Or, you know, it was just, their lives were going inwards as my and Dan's lives were going outwards. So we came back to London.
And that's exactly what we did. Scarlett was 13 and we felt it wasn't working for her, and I was quite pleased. I was very pleased. I love London. 30 years there, really.
I absolutely love it. Coming back, I actually had this feeling that I'd come back to my village. You know, in Cumbria, there's this saying that everyone eventually goes back to their own village. And I got back to London, bought a house about 1.5 streets away from the house I'd lived in before I left. And I just was this maniac who walked around grinning at everybody and saying good morning to everybody, just because it was so gorgeous to fall back into life. Because you don't realise, I am a Londoner, and if you go and live in the middle of nowhere, everything has to be arranged. You want to see a friend, it's an arrangement. It's, you know, next week, and you're in London and you bump into a mate and you see a show on that you haven't noticed being advertised. You know, it's and there's some of everybody. It's such a relief. I just adore London.
And really, I mean, thinking about your work in relation to the city. So my work before I moved to Provence was like haute couture. We're friends with Andrew Logan and Sandra Rhodes and all those fantastic people. And I used to get a pot and then dress it with this elaborate, labor-intensive kind of surface, as if it was wearing a beautiful dress. And I got to Provence and I was quite shocked, because I tend not to think about things too much. I was quite shocked that what I was making seemed quite meaningless. Because haute couture does not belong in a Provençal village, you know.
Goodness.
And so I then sort of didn't, took a little while to get around it, but I found I made much more simple things, and much more, I think, you know, these giant walnuts and these giant pods, and then these pieces based on all the succulents and the flowers and the olives and things like that. But so I sort of, you know, I responded to, and now I've moved to Kent. I've still got a London studio, a very small one, but for the first time in my life, I've got a sort of quite large studio in Kent. And I'm not feeling it, because it's only an hour and a half from London. You know, we were removed as you were up there. Did you feel a different relevance of your work to the context in which, well, you were living 2 miles away, I believe, from the road?
Yes, I was. No, well, the thing was, I never intended, this is going to sound really awful, but I wasn't looking for a village that I could fit into. I wasn't looking for a world to join.
No, I wasn't.
Looking for solitude for a studio. So I would have a show in New York. I would, get 2 miles down the track, as long as the beck hadn't flooded, get on the train, go to Liverpool and fly to New York, and I'd still have sheep poo on my shoes when I got into New York, you know. But I consciously knew that there would never be a place for me outside of London. And I think you just touched on something. I think one of the main reasons that I simply, you know, it was like flowering, you know. I was like a dried up old stick that had new leaves when I got back to London. And I think it's because you don't have to explain yourself. Whereas when you move away to a place which is so specific in its interests and its purpose, you slightly have to explain everything you are, everything you do. And being in London for me was just a huge relief. And I will go back to the lake from the hills, you know, on the flimsiest of excuses. I could buy a farm and move back there tomorrow, but I would never lose my London studio. I think you need to be fed by whatever this horrific energy that there is in London. That's the test for your work.
So I think I'm fed more by people than a place.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. That's absolutely right. This railway arch that I'm sitting in, it could actually be anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, I happen to be quite fond of my neighbours, and I'm fond of the people who trundle up and down outside the studio, and you know, I'm fond of the pigeons that live on the roof opposite. But actually, the studio, the requirement of a studio is that the world drops away. I think that's another reason for not letting people come to the studio, is that the minute you become self-conscious, you're a little bit stuffed. You said something really interesting a little moment ago about, oh God, I can't remember what you said, but it made me think. No, the whole point is you don't do what you know. If you do what you know, you're stuck. You've got to be open to events happening. You've got to be open to, I imagine you have accidents in your studio where a pot will explode or not work or something.
Yes, I mean,
for me, my assistant by mistake knocked over a piece of sculpture last week. And actually it was the most extraordinarily brilliant thing, because the sculpture was so finished and it was so wrong, and I didn't have the courage to go in there and fix what needed fixing. He caught his toe in a lead or something and off it went. And within seconds, oh thank God for that, now I rebuild it, now I get everything in the right place. You know,
you see, I'm the opposite, and I've been reading your book, and it's like there's no 1 in 5 things survive the bin, right?
Yeah.
But nothing goes in my bin. I don't know why. Maybe it's to do with the fact that if it's fired, it's had the world's resources spent on it, and I'd rather sort of finish it and give it to the milkman's wife because she likes pottery than sort of put it in the bin. I mean, it's a different, and I just think, I never say die to a thing. In fact, I think actually with ceramics, and you talk about process, your process is so instant. Yes. And the reason you don't particularly like clay is because you make something, but then you have to deal with it. You have to follow it through different stages. And essentially, I can have something that I think's really not engaging, and I don't quite know why I'm doing it. But like you say, you have to do things, you have to feel it in your guts, not your head. But an average piece can be suddenly fabulous by the glaze. And what I think is a fabulous piece can be awful by the glaze. So we've got our the parallels are very strong, but my process is so long and prolonged, I can't judge it till the end. However, if something comes out of the kiln at the end and I don't think it's as good as it could have been, I don't smash it, I sell it. Because I believe that decisions, and you talk about, what did you write? You wrote that it's a series of decisions made. Is your thing that you said? Work is about. Oh no, David Attenborough says he collects pots because he feels a good pot is indication of a whole lot of decisions made through the process that are wise ones, often restrained ones. He likes Lucy Ree and Hans Koper, very restrained pots. But you've said. I'm trying to look. I wrote it down because I thought it was so interesting. I can't find it.
While you find it, Kate, I'll tell you that when I'm talking about throwing away, I'm talking about bashing all the plaster off it, remaking the armature out of the armature and trying again. It's very rare that I completely abandon a piece.
Okay.
But if it's not working, it's actually quicker to smash it up and start again.
Yes.
And I think it's a truism as well. You know, for all the time you're trying to fix mistakes, you're curtailing yourself, and it's really better to start from the beginning again. It's always going to be a compromise.
Yes. I mean, you've said, I have a different, you say work, you can't sit around and wait for ideas to come, that work comes from work.
Absolutely.
And I call it faith, not a religious faith, but having faith in the process, in that you start and you make the decisions. You have to have faith in your ability to make decisions and to move forward. But you talk about it, recognizing moments. That's the word that you said.
Oh, being awake.
Art is about recognizing.
You've got to be awake all the time. You know, it's the work of a moment to make a gesture, which is so perfect that something in your brain makes you go back and unmake it the other way. Or you're walking in the morning and your eye goes straight to the bit that's working, and you've just got to get the saw out and just finish it, and the whole face will drop off. Or, you know, it's about being awake and not going past the moment when the magic has happened.
But I talk about it like it's a flow state. And I know we're going to go to question and answers in a minute, but this is so, you know, so I've meant to have this conversation with you. You know, when you're working and you lose track of time and 6 hours has passed and you realize, you know, your back's killing you, and, you know, and you're in that zone, you're in that flow state, which is hypnotic and extraordinary, and giving yourself to that state. I find it more difficult to do that, actually, possibly, but you have to decide to put yourself in that position, don't you?
It happened. I can't stop it, and it happens. And it's actually been pointed out to me that I actually stopped breathing as well. I am so involved, and I find it really, really difficult sitting here talking to you, because I'm surrounded by things that every time I turn that way, I see that owl, and it's just something wrong about his forehead. So the effort to stay fixed when I know that really I ought to be over there fixing that owl is extraordinary. And sometimes I say to myself, Kate, you know, why are you drawing another horse? Surely you've done enough horses by now. I've never got one right, and that's why I keep going. But the thrill of drawing the surface of a horse, and you know the way a horse lives it through its skin, and every twitch and every change of shape is a feeling or a statement. And I never, ever, I could spend probably the rest of my life drawing from the shoulder to the rump of a horse. Just because that journey over shape is it just doesn't get any better.
No, well, I feel the same about trees. I mean, there are so many. I wish we had longer, because, you know, we're women who've had children, who still have a career. We have fantastic husbands. We've had fantastic teachers. I had such great teachers. There are all sorts of parallels that we could carry on talking about, but I think Charlotte's
one thing, Kate, that I really did want to say is that I think that young women in particular, and I'm sure this goes for young fathers as well, but I don't know so many, have a really hard time imagining how they're going to be a studio professional and a mother and a wife or a partner. And I think you and we need to start talking more to young women about how this is possible. Because whatever you think of us, here we are in our 60s. We've never done anything else. We've kept the ball up in the balls, the plates are spinning. And it is possible. I think it's the best life in the world. And I'm starting some seminars in London for young mums in particular, but young parents, I would call it, just to come in and talk to people who are out the other side. It is not only possible, it's glorious.
Yes. And
the internet is the other thing I could talk to you about forever, because there's just one thing I wanted to say, Sally. My mother and grandmother's generation fought so hard because they came from a world where you had to fit in. It's actually possible to wear the wrong trousers or, you know, speak with the wrong voice. And my grandmother, my mother and me felt that we really had got somewhere with saying, no, you're just a person, live your life. And now I see my daughter's generation going back to the internet, needing likes, and things are, you know, right or wrong, and they've got to fit in. And sometimes I'm in despair about it. Anyway, sorry, Sally. I know that you.
Well, no, I think we should bring in everybody to join this very intimate conversation. It's been brilliant. So if everybody would like to, you know, show their videos, and then I can begin to ask some questions, which are coming in, which is lovely.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, there are many people. There are about 70 people on this call.
Oh,
so
lovely.
Lovely to know. So
your studios too.
Yeah. You haven't shown us your studio. Do you want to have a quick whip around your studio?
Oh, mine?
Yes, that's what Nicola was just saying. But I could see some beautiful pots behind you.
Everybody who's joined us.
Ah. Okay, yes, everybody. Obviously,
yes, I mean other people. I'd rather see what's going on out there. Is anybody in their studios?
I can't see any studios. I don't know whether anybody wants to put their hand up for a studio.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put anybody under any pressure. It's not
But we do have questions. So, so one of the first questions, obviously, is what you touched on, Nicola, when you were showing us around your studio, which is how has lockdown affected you both? You know, what has been the difference to what normally is happening?
Well, it was this business that suddenly the whole world seemed to be reveling in creativity and seeing it as a wonderful opportunity to, you know, express themselves and get the paints out, which is fabulous, absolutely fabulous. But from my point of view, I've been working for a show for, you know, over a year, the biggest show of my career to date, a travelling, a big show. And not only is everything cancelled, but some of the venues have just gone. You know, they've gone as a result. And I found myself walking into the studio and thinking, what am I doing? You know, what is this for? It didn't last, thank God, but it was a real feeling of being overwhelmed by what I have created in faith. That nobody's asked me to, it has no place in the world. So I found it, once I got my head around it and decided that...
Hang on, somebody start? Oh, good, it's okay, carry on. Someone started sharing their screen to us.
Jennifer, I'd love to talk to Jennifer Lee.
Oh, hello, Jennifer Lee. What I was saying is, once I got my head around it and realised that it was a time to do something different and not keep bashing my head against the wall, I started playing with colour, which is something I never allow myself to do. Because what the hell, you know, this might be the end of the world. And it's been a real adventure.
Okay.
So lockdown for me, devastating on all levels. You know, dad in a care home, can't see my family. It's horrible. I haven't had it. Nobody's been for dinners for about you know, since when was it? March. It's miserable.
How about you, Kate? What about you?
Well, as the day lockdown happened, because I have 9 assistants who work 2 days a week each, and the wages that I pay them sustains them in their own practice. And they're brilliant. They've helped me so much to have my productivity and my creativity sort of flourish. So I felt an immediate responsibility to them. They slipped through the net of government help. They're self-employed and don't make enough profit to get grants judged on their profits. So I had the sort of big job of thinking, how am I going to keep them going? So I didn't really have a chance to think about it. I just had to get on and give them, you know, send them molds, send them clay, get a courier, try and sort things out. So I sort of have a slight regret that I haven't spent this time doing things that I've always dreamt of doing without the community that I built up. And
but
so
you can't do that though, because you don't have the emotional space. You know, it's a dreadful, the political situation throughout the world, the COVID situation, it was all too much. You can't do all those things you've longed to do. I started doing a lockdown visual diary because I was staying with my brother, and I found myself walking into the woods and doing watercolours of you know, staggering trees. And every day I forced myself to start working again because I really just didn't want to work at all.
Oh, how fantastic.
Now I look back at it, everything looks like apocalyptic, the end of the world, gloom and doom. And that's how I was feeling. But I just had to force myself to go out and pick up a stone or a feather or an egg or just something and draw it. Just because I was going to forget who I was.
I mean, I actually, I wouldn't have asked for this to happen for anything, but I felt that I was spreading myself rather thinly in lots of places, you know, going to New York, going to here, going to there. And actually this has been the first time I've stayed in more or less one place for months on end, for 30 years, you know, having the home in France, coming back, maintaining the business, maintaining the team. So I wouldn't have wanted it for the world, but I haven't felt it's that bad for me personally as a maker.
The best thing of the whole thing has been spending all this time with Dan in our house.
And my husband,
and, you know, that really has been the best part of it.
Yes.
You know, almost like falling in love again and falling in love with your house again.
Yes.
It's just, you know, we never get to spend that real time together.
Nicola, I've got a question here from Martin. He said, how big a part in your work does the human figure play? We see the dramatic head of Andrew Logan, for example, he said.
Andrew Logan, he is such a beautiful man.
Oh,
he is so beautiful. I mean, he's like a sculptor's dream, really. He's not just beautiful, he emits this Buddha-like calm and charm. And how important is the human figure? Very. I absolutely adore it. But when you see a beautiful body, it's almost like I don't want to make a sculpture of it because it's so gorgeous. I can't do anything with it. There it is. It's a funny one. I do a lot of life drawing when I have the time, and I find myself making figures over and over. But in the end, I think in your career you get asked very similar questions because they are, you know, they're the questions that are interesting. And throughout your life, you give different answers as different things are applicable. And I'm now beginning to think that the reason I use animals so much more than I use people is that when I'm looking at a person, I'm quite shy and my eye pulls away from looking people directly in the eye. So how do I feel about people? I'm absolutely overawed by them. And if I love them or I know them very well, I have to make a sculpture about them. But if I'm just admiring or being overwhelmed or full of whatever it might be, pity, love, I don't know, depending on the person, it's slightly too intense, that in the eye contact, for me to really be able to say what I want to say.
Okay, so this is one that I was emailed earlier. It's from I think a young student, art student, who used to be in Cambridge at Hills Road, and she says, "I know from reading about you, Nicola, that you draw every day.
Yes.
How does it feel when you are really in the place where creativity flows for you? How would you describe that feeling?" That's a hard one.
No, it's not hard at all.
Oh.
It feels like breathing. It feels like breathing. It feels like the world has dropped away. You're almost unconscious of the movements you're making. It's like flying. It's like breathing. It's, you know, I know, Kate, you swim in the sea every day, and I imagine it's like that. It's all encompassing, but quite literally, everything drops away and you are in your zone, and there isn't a better word for it. And if you find, talking to the young person, if you find a mechanism for getting yourself into that zone. My dad used to talk about the art of Zen in studio maintenance, and he would go into his studio every morning and solemnly sweep the floor, not because it needed sweeping, but because it got him in the rhythm for beginning to paint. And then he would put his overall on, and he would be, I don't know what else he was doing, but by the time he'd gone through this little ritual, he was ready to pick up his paintbrushes and go. And I think that we all have to learn our own ways of getting into the zone, but you can learn it, like music.
I think this next question, I have actually seen on your Instagram, so it might be a little bit contentious. Shall I ask Kate first? It's a question from Cabby. Did you both like the Grayson Art Club?
I loved it. I loved it because it just, his responses were so honest, and I thought it just showed that everybody can be involved with creativity. I didn't see all of it because I'm not a TV person, but I was so thrilled, and I've been meaning to try and watch it again or something. But there were moments when he responded to makers who were finding it very difficult, and his responses were so sensitive and so immediate. So, and I just loved it because I think all making is, you know, we're all, you know, you can be artists, and various people were making tiny little models out of plasticine, and it was just, I mean, the whole thing, I loved it. What about you, Nikki? Did you see it?
I didn't see a lot of it.
No,
I think anybody who can communicate and make it easier in any way for somebody to feel justified in sitting down and making something is a hero in my book. The things I love about Grayson are his work, for a start, his spontaneity, his honesty. I find this with all potters, all ceramicists, this incredible generosity of spirit. I don't think you can find it with sculptors or painters. We're all much more sort of anxious and, if somebody asks me how I got that particular colour, I'm quite twitchy about it. But I'm learning. I'm learning from you. I'm learning. But I was so furious with Grayson about what he said about COVID sorting out the deadwood that I haven't been back to check his quotes. So
I heard him say that, and I
can't quite get over that idea that there is such a thing as deadwood in the art world.
Yes, because that area of failure or success is the area that we're always wanting to put ourselves in, to be free to make mistakes, and it's where true creativity comes from the edges. And so to call it deadwood, that did disappoint me, I have to say.
Not to mention all the beautiful, wonderful people who work in order that we can work. People, manning museums and selling tickets and guiding people around shows, and all the artists who they're working at home and they support themselves working in the Tate shop or whatever.
What does the person who asked the question think? Have we got an answer from that?
Good point.
I think that was, let me just see who it is. Do you want to answer that? Hello? Obviously not. What we're having a bit of a problem is, I believe people's videos can't be turned on. Can you turn your videos on or not? Cabby, I think it was you who asked the question through Charlotte. What were your thoughts? Hello?
Perhaps people don't like being put on the spot.
No, she's just replied to me in person. She said, "Hi, yes, I love Grayson." And her question was, did you both like Grayson's art club?
Yes, exactly. Well,
Grayson is a natural hero. I think he's done more for the art world than nearly anyone else. He's opened so many doors. He's opened so many possibilities for so many people. And I think that's why it was doubly shocking that he made this extraordinary statement. Now, I imagine that he was being Grayson. I don't know him, but I imagine he was being Grayson and simply saying exactly what he was thinking without editing himself. And he was probably thinking about something specific. I'm going to try and be generous here. I hope he was talking about people who were clogging up the top end of the art world rather than people who were at the other end of the art world.
Okay, we've got more questions. So Arabella has said, you briefly touched on, this is to Nicola, you briefly touched on partners and children, but you're obviously driven to be in the studio on your own.
Yes.
Have there been times when you felt there just wasn't enough of you to go round? I think that's from the heart.
Always. Since I had my first baby, I think I've felt a failure. I think you do. I think it's part of being a working mother. You're failing your child if you're at work, and you're failing your work if you're with your child. And I think that having made it to 60 and with two absolutely wonderful adults that were my children at the other end of it, I'm so proud of everything they do, who they are. I'm in awe of them. And yes, we've had some terrible bumpy times. Of course we have, we're a family. But actually I would say to any person at the beginning of it, just weather it. It's okay. Yes, it's difficult. Everything good is difficult. Just keep at it. And in the end, your children will be so proud that there is something that you are passionate about and that you do. I always try to involve my children very much in the studio. It's my husband I feel sorry for, he would have loved to sort of come home and have hot supper on the table at 8 o'clock, and it doesn't always happen. We work really hard to make it happen, but I think it's a daily battle. But it can be done, and it should be done. And
We have amazing husbands, though, Nikki.
We do. We have
adore us. Thank God.
Facilitators.
Yeah.
You know,
without a doubt.
Absolutely. You know, the most supportive, the most understanding, the most, you know, giving you chances to grow and move forward. And you know, but that's what every marriage should be like. That's what every family should be like. But it is tough. But you know, in my mother's generation, it was more tough. In my grandmother's generation, it was much more tough. And I noticed
lots of questions. Okay, there's a question here from a student, again to Nicola. Where does the human stop and the animal start in your sculptures, please?
Oh my God! Oh, I wish I knew. I don't see enough difference between the animal and the human to be able to really answer that question. It's all the same to me. You know, if I choose to make a cat with a monkey's face, it's as... actually, I've never done that. I don't know why that occurred to me. But human bodies say something, they mean something to me. I'm not talking about generally. Although I do think I tap into a pool that we've all got images in our head, like Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Bear and the Little Cuddly Bear. And I'm tapping into that, no doubt. But I wish I could answer that question. And I really can't.
Can I just say to everybody, I haven't turned off any videos. So if you can't turn on your video, I mean, I can ask you to turn it on. I mean, you don't have to, but a lot of people are popping up in the chat saying I'm preventing them turning on their videos. Not as far as I know. There's Adrian Sassoon down there for you, Kate. So this is from Penny. I mean, please, do tell me if you can't, and I'll try and do my best. But from Penny, I love the large drawings on large rough sheets of brown paper joined up together. Can you talk about your drawing technique and inspiration for these energetic forms?
Yes, of course. Well, normally I'm sitting somewhere and out of nowhere this idea arrives and I have to quickly put it on a piece of paper. And it might be a bus ticket, it might be a paper bag, it might be the floor, it might be anywhere. I just had to get down the nuts and bolts of what this thing is. In fact, this is quite a good example. Did I talk before about being in Spain with my brother?
Yes, you did.
And then I trailed off. Did I talk about the child catcher? So stop me if I've said this before.
No, I haven't. I can't remember the child catcher. Everybody, if you can, put your hand up.
So I walked into this, the heat of the day, you know what it's like, you're walking around those little Spanish villages, and suddenly there was a place that looked like it was selling lemonade and coffee, and we bundled in, and it was the bull ring. It was the village's tiny bull ring, and in the middle of the bull ring was a bull's head jammed onto a bicycle, and it was just lying in the arena. And we realised it was some sort of teaching tool. It was just this fabulous image. It was a bull's head and a cronky old bicycle, only one wheel, and the sitting in this ancient ring of death and celebration, and this training aid on the floor. I didn't know how I was going to use it, but it was an image that had to come back. So then I would come back to my studio, and the reason I use big paper is because I don't really want to be aware of the edges. So I start drawing on a piece of paper where the image will fit, that's burning a hole here, and I'm not aware of the edges, so I don't feel as though I'm making a picture. I'm trying to get what's in here out onto the wall. And so the paper gets bigger or smaller depending on the size of what's in here. I just mustn't be worrying about the edges. And the reason I use this paper is that it's very cheap, it comes on huge rolls. If I stuff it up, it goes in the bin and it's not an issue. If I succeed, it's pretty robust, it'll last. And that is my practice. My new practice, which is much more exciting, is I've always loved collage, but you get sort of trapped into the line of work that you do. And it's very difficult, I'm sure Kate will agree with this, it's very difficult to change tack substantially without a shove, like somebody asking you to do something different. And I've never really found a good way of getting collage back into my work. So now, on the scale I'm working, I'm absolutely loving drawing goes wrong, stick a bit of paper over it, draw over the top of that, stick a bit of paper over it, draw over that, and really building up these quite thick drawings is pretty thrilling and different. But if I'm like when I was showing you before the drawings for prints, which are on really, very grand posh paper, each piece is terrifying because it just feels like it's a very valuable piece of paper, and I'm already slightly anxious. Whereas this stuff, I just hold myself in.
Okay. As the child of artists, Nicola,
Yes.
did you always feel that being a sculptor was your destiny?
Yes, actually, yes. It's specifically sculpture. Yeah, I don't think I ever really thought about it. It's just what I did. They did what they did. I did what I did, and I think I don't know if this happened to you as well, Kate, and I don't know if I've said this too many times, but the level of interest and conversation at home was so extraordinary. The level of conversation about I wasn't taking part. I was listening. The talk that went on about the arts, musicians and dancers and painters and sculptors and ceramicists. It was so incredible. I must have been an absolute nightmare at school because, in the art lessons, people would say it was all about colouring within the lines, wasn't it? And I saw the line as an affront. I'd sort of mentally gone past all of that. So,
so that's so different to my experience, because there was no talk at home. The talk was whether my father had a birdie on the 9th hole or whether my brothers had scored a goal. There was no talk. I had no idea that an artistic world existed. Hence my total delight to be part of it. You just go up
15 notches in my admiration, because how on earth did you do it? It was easy for me. It was just what everyone did.
Well, no, it was easy because my parents just let me get on with what made me happy. I mean, that was the great thing. But no, I had no idea that an artistic place existed at all. I saw glimmers of it in my art teacher, who was quite bohemian, and I don't think I saw glimmers of it anywhere really. And then so I think it makes being part of an artistic world, despite and because of the dearth of it, so incredibly magical. I mean, I don't know about you, Nikki, I feel so lucky to be in a creative position and also to have an audience. We've got people listening to us today, and it's such an honour. In aid of Kettle's Yard, I went there. It was one of the first beautiful places I think I went to as an art student, a home, an artistic, intelligent home. I never, I'm not putting down my home. It was fantastic, and my mum was very creative in her way. She made clothes and the curtains and things. But I just think it's just so brilliant. And I mean, I think we're running over with Kettle's Yard, but we need to bring it back to, we're here, and it's so great that everybody's listened and they've paid a little bit, and that Sally, thank you, Sally, has brought us into this.
Well, I've just got one. So I do want to ask Nicola, I know you had an exhibition at Kettle's Yard when you were younger, when you were first, can you remember it or not?
Do you know, it's one of the really, really sad things that my career pre-internet was pretty extraordinary. And I had shows all over the place, and I can barely remember any of them. Yeah. I don't seem to have rear view mirrors. I'm only really interested in what I'm making today. So people would say, have you been to Frankfurt? And I think, was it Frankfurt or Hamburg? I know it was something that you could eat, but and anyway, I only would have gone from the airport to the exhibition.
I understand. I mean, it's because I was trying to find out a bit more about it, and as you said,
I do remember showing into Kettle's Yard. I can't remember what it was. I remember, I didn't really want to say this, but I remember it being a terribly male atmosphere. And I'm rather delighted to find, I've always been a terrible old feminist, and you know, I do slightly bristle when I'm the only one, or I'm one of two, or you know, it's lovely to see a more fulsome atmosphere now at Kettle.
Oh, that's good. And Kate, we can't possibly leave without you telling us a bit about what's happening on Thursday. And I know you've got Sakib here too, but we would love to know, you know, a bit more. I think what you've done is absolutely amazing. I mean, thank you also for both of you coming along today to talk to us about, I mean, this is very intimate, and I know neither of you do this very often, so I'm very, very thrilled. But also, we'd love to know. So tell us what it's all about and why, and what's going to happen on Thursday.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you for the opportunity for that. Well, the project is called Fired Up 4, and it's the number 4. So to get really lots of information, you can just go to that website and it'll just link you through to everything. But essentially, I do pottery because I was at a rather quite rough, but really fabulous, big, progressive, comprehensive school outside Bristol as a child. And we had metalwork, woodwork, pottery, sewing and cooking as part of the national, you know, there was an education policy that made craft and making and having ability with your hands as part of the national curriculum. And so essentially, it's being squeezed out now in education, especially ceramics with kilns and the costs of things. And so I just wanted to, and it was before lockdown, it's been, Sakib is here watching, and he's been my passepartout, my right arm through all this. We've put in so much time, but I asked 32 makers, of which Nikki is one, who made the most fantastic owl, which is up for auction. There are 33 objects for auction coming to a head on Thursday night at the MAK, M-A-A-K, the International Ceramics Auction Site, run from outside London in Berkshire. And essentially, you can bid on these things, and hopefully these pieces, not things, and these are pieces given by the artists with their hearts. Some of them are from their own collections, and some of them I asked everybody to look at making with 3 kilos of clay. And essentially, the money that we get is hopefully, well, it will be, equipping, building, and providing training for young people who really wouldn't get a chance to have a go at ceramics. And at the moment, it's for Wigan and Chorley, and they're under the umbrella of this great charity called Youth Zones that have been going for a long time. There are 14 of them in the country that offer incredible opportunity to all children, but really with an emphasis on those who are vulnerable and marginalised. But you know, all kids go for 50p. It's an after-school club that you could never believe. There are climbing walls and pitch, football, lots of sport, lots of music. But the arts are something that I wanted to develop, and they asked me, thank heavens, and it's made lockdown so amazing to feel that we're doing something for our community. They asked me to be their ambassador for ceramics. And so we are equipping 2 studios. Our objectives are quite high to get £100,000. Not sure if we'll get that. But if any of you who are listening, you know, do go and have a look, read the catalogue. There are some lovely on my Instagram, which is Kate Malone, lower school ceramics. And I use my Instagram not really to sell, but to educate and communicate. You'll see all sorts of great characters, Andrew Logan included, Britt Eklund included, Sarah Cox, Johnny Bay, all sorts of great characters talking in support of our project. And it's not going to end here. You know, there's a lot of need for kilns and training. There's a company called Make North, so in Wigan and Chorley, they're supporting the staff at the youth zone so that they really get guidance, because you can have a kiln and a potter's wheel and it means nothing unless you have the guidance and the ability. So this project isn't just about starting it, it's about maintaining it. And Nikki made this fantastic owl. All of you go and bid on Nikki's owl. It's such a rare thing. It's in clay. It's not bronze or plaster, it's clay. So really, yeah, I can't tell you. And Sakib, thank you so much for helping, because, you know, it's been a huge project with lots of people pulling together.
Okay, what is happening on Thursday then? What time does the auction?
The auction is open now, and it has been for a few weeks, so you can bid on the pieces right now. but the auction hammer on the 19th at 7 o'clock, that's when the auction hammer will begin to close on each of the items. And that's MAC who are controlling that. So we don't really know how much money we're going to get. Until then, I'm really nervous, because a lot of the artists, you'll appreciate, they give a piece. John Ward, when I asked him, he's in his 80s, one of England's great makers. When I phoned and asked him, he said, I'm so sorry, I don't have anything. I have nothing for you. And he's one of the key ones that MAC, the lady at MAC, sort of said, we need to get some people on board. We have Edmund Duval on board. Grayson couldn't do it, and he had a very legitimate reason for not being able to do it, but loads of people did it. And essentially, it's just incredible. So John Ward phoned me back a few months later during lockdown, and he said he'd thought about it, and it was so important a project that he's given us a piece from his own collection. You know, I mean, and other people, other makers have done the same. They've been very generous. Not only have they given, they've made statements, they've filled in forms that Saqib's been menacing them for all sorts of statements and films, and we've been sending them T-shirts and asking them to make films about it. I mean, it's this whole thing about spreading the word. And I can't believe it's coming to a head on Thursday.
Yes,
can you believe it?
Yeah, I did feel very sorry for you on Women's Hour on Friday.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if any of you heard.
Have 10 minutes.
Yes.
We meant to have 10 minutes, and I had 100 seconds. And they've actually phoned and said that they were, you know, they were sorry that it had not gone to plan. And hopefully I'll be back on maybe next week talking about the project. So it'll be retrospectively, unfortunately, because I was trying to get the Nation, although I wasn't allowed to mention the auction for obvious reasons, the BBC. Yeah. I was trying to get the Nation to bid. So all of you out there, please tell all your friends. There are some beautiful pieces, and all the money goes to help these kids.
Can I just
I'm not allowed to say kids, it's young people, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. Nicola, can I ask you one last question on that? So you've made an owl for Fired Up Full. How much ceramics of yours is out there in the world?
Nothing. I made it, Kate said 3 kilos of clay, and I thought, well, it's Kate, of course I'm going to do it. Does she mean 3 kilos wet or 3 kilos dry? I had absolutely no. Luckily, my daughter, who shall remain nameless, was on a course that shall remain nameless, and she managed to slip it into a kiln in an educational department. And so I managed to get it fired that way. And a similar story for the glaze, but I enjoyed making it so much. What it is Picasso's owl. There are various photographs of Picasso with animals, and there's a picture of him with his little owl. And the beadiness that comes out of Picasso and out of the owl. And I thought, well, I'll have a go at making Picasso in an owl. But, you know, I'm a baby in terms of making ceramics. I'm signing up for a course thanks to this, because it's too delicious. I've got to make a set of plates. That's all there is to it.
Well,
so Nikki, in your book, Nikki, just for the last thing, you said that the colour of clay is like the smell of sleep.
Yeah, it is.
Beautiful.
It is. I mean, if it wasn't so dangerous, I'd bury my face in clay, because it's if you can just stick your fingers in clay, everything's fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Clay is everything, and you know, you've got this mud in your hand, and you make something. It's magic.
Yeah,
it's absolute magic. I love
it. Jennifer Lee has made a comment. She said, "Everyone, you must look at this owl." She said, "It is haunting." She said, "It's beautiful and haunting." So I think that's a very, very a lovely comment to end on, and I would like to thank you both very much. In fact, if you'd all like to unmute ourselves and clap, because this has been a very special evening. And